All right. Thank you, everybody, for joining our prplWare 3.1 certification and updates webinar today. My name is Peter Steinhäuser. I'm a prplOS project manager. I will give some introductory words about the prplOS and the latest 3.1 release, and then we'll hand over to Tim Winters, who's getting to the core of this webinar, the prplWare certification. Okay, so we have that already. So let's move on. Yeah, and very important, Tim is the Purple Testing Committee Chair and CTO of QA Cafe. QA Cafe is providing Purple Foundation also with the CD router appliances, which are the core part of the Purple CI and certification testbed. So it's really an integral part of it. So let's have a quick look at the agenda for today. As already mentioned, I will give a short introduction to prplOS. We will go through the latest enhancements in the prplOS 3.1 release, and also a short note on how to get started with prplOS. From the attendee list, I did see a couple of people who are already involved with prplOS, so I will keep it short, not to repeat too many things. Okay, so a few words about prplOS. So prplOS is CPE firmware and stack, and it uses OpenWRT's build system and a couple of the components of OpenWRT software infrastructure. The goal of prplOS is to add features to OpenWRT that make it carrier grade. And those features are defined by the operators who are using prplOS. So for instance, a security architecture for deployments and operations, a very flexible and compatible lifecycle management, of course, remote management via CWMP, also called TR069, and USP, which is TR369, easy mesh, and a lot more. A requirement here in prplOS is to conform with what we call the high-level API and the low-level API. So the high-level API, a few words about that. This is built around the TR181 specification from the Broadband Forum and is the representation of a CPE status and configuration. Also provides some functions that are also defined in the standard. Well, let's have a quick look how this architecture looks. This, of course, is just an abstract, but I think it shows a little bit how things work together. So on the lower end, we have the Linux kernel, we have our daemon system, daemons core services, etc. And then we have the low-level API. So this sounds a little bit unfamiliar in the beginning, but at the end, it's quite simple. So the low-level API mostly consists of the standard Linux interfaces that are already been standardized. But there are certain fields, specifically when new technologies come in, for instance, Wi-Fi sensing, there is no such standard. And here is where the Purple Foundation steps in, and specifically the low-level API working group, and is helping to standardize those parts. So these are also becoming part of the low-level API. The importance of the low-level API is that every device maker who wants to provide a device that is able to run prplOS properly should make sure that the hardware support is compliant with a low-level API. Then on top of the low-level API, we have, and this is very specific to prplOS, we have a set of services, or we call it components. And these components all implement part of the TR181 data model and services, I have to say. So for instance, here we have device firewall, device IP, device interface, etc. So as you can see, most of those components implement a root object of the TR181 data model. Some do implement a subroot object, but that's more a side case. And all this then is what we call the high-level API, which is exposed to the upper layers in this stack again. Of course, the most important one, the remote management via CWMP and USP. Of course, for the local management, where you can access the high-level API via HTTP or via REST API. And of course, also for the LCM applications. And this is one of the big achievements also in prpl, to make this process very simple and very transparent, so app developers can provide their software apps for prplOS as well. And to note that, sorry for that, the prpl Foundation is also providing the LCM layer for RDK as well as prpl Mesh. And this is a very beneficial part for members that use prplOS and also RDK, because they can use the same containers and the same management for both types of firmware deployments. Okay. If there are no questions so far, let's just move over to prplOS prplWare 3.1 release. So there was a very clear focus for this release. So first of all, we did upstep the underlying base OpenWRT system from OpenWRT 2201 to 2305, which brought us kernel 5.15 and newer support. And this was an important step, so we could integrate new reference platforms with Wi-Fi 7. And here we now have two reference platforms. One is Qualcomm-based from WNC, it's the Freedom platform. And then we have built by Gemtek with MaxLinear chipsets, the OSP version 2. Difference between version 1 and version 2 is mainly that version 2 comes with Wi-Fi 7. As with every release, we integrated the latest available prpl Mesh 4.2.6. I have to admit, we actually did plan to integrate prpl Mesh 4.3, which would have brought EasyMesh R4 support, but there were some issues with the hardware support for Wi-Fi, which prevented us to using this release. prpl Mesh 4.3 is scheduled for release end of this month. So then this is also becoming available as a component, but not in a new release yet. Also, a very important upstep was prpl LCM to version 3.6.0, which opened role-based access control for LCM applications, the USP data model. And another big step more for the internal architecture of prplOS 3.1 was the support of the UDS-INTP, which is a message bus which is exposed by the OBUSPA agent, which is used for TR369 USP. And this message bus is now used for the communication between the components we show here in the high-level API part, to solve a couple of problems we did experience in the 3.0 release. So it looks basically like this. As you may know, the components use the embeORX framework from Soft at Home. And this framework exposes a bus backend to the components. And this bus backend now supports multiple buses. Well, it already did, but in prplOS 3.1, we have the UDS-IMTP added. So there is a direct bus communication with OV-USB-A. And the internal testing showed that this also tremendously improved the performance of the communication. I don't know if some of you have experience if you do a get device.dash, so you want to have the whole tier 1 at 1 data model. This can take a while. And now it's really down to a very reasonable time frame, to say it like that. I mean, Tim, you probably have the exact numbers, but it was around about 30 seconds or something like that, right?
Yeah, significant improvement on 3.1 that we were really excited about.
Yeah. Okay, so these were the main steps in prplOS 3.1. And now let's just give you a quick overview if you want to get started with prplOS, if you want to try it out. It's very simple. So the best way you do it, if you have a Linux VM, for instance, with a recent Debian installation on it, you need a few developer tools, but those are usually included. You need Git, you need Python, compiler, of course, serial cable, which you connect to the device. Ideally, if you have one of the reference platform available, which is not so simple, but we have clear procedures how you can obtain them. It makes things easier. And what we have to note here, and this is a case with MaxLinear at the moment, there are some non-open source driver components you need to support for the device. MaxLinear made that case very simple. So we have a kind of NDA type for prpl members. So if as a prpl member, you contact MaxLinear, you sign the NDA, and then you get a Git key, and then you can pull in the code that's needed. Once the preparations are done, the process is very, very simple. So you just use the Git client to get the sources from prpl's Git repository. Then we have a set of build scripts, as you can see as an example. So you have the genconfig Python script, and it just gets a couple of parameters like the chipset platforms, then prpl for the base system, and then you can add other components like prpl mesh, LCM, etc. You type make, you build the firmware, and then depending on the firmware, you flash it on the device. And that's it. The detailed processes are all described for each reference platform in GitLab. So this is openly available also for non-members. And that's it for the beginning from my side. So are there any questions?
Yeah, for everybody, there is a little window, a Q&A window. If you have any questions, please feel free to drop them right in that chat, and we'll try to answer them as we go along. Thanks.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you, Tim. And with this, I hand over to Tim. So now we come to the question, how do I get it certified, right?
Yes.
If it's okay for you, Tim, you just tell me next slide and I just move forward.
Perfect. Yeah. Okay, so I'm going to talk a little bit today about how to get certified, and I thought I'd start today with the problem. So one thing that we've run into, as the CPE market has a lot of different middleware platforms that are customized and need to be customized based on the SOC, right? The board designs, the actual firmware running on the box, they're all different, right? And so one thing that Purple wanted to solve was, hey, open source projects, sometimes people think, oh, it's an open source project, there'll be less fragmentation. Actually, they make it easier. They make it a lot easier, which is good in some ways. In some ways, it's not great, right? Operators need to be able to, this was a concern of operators really when they started Purple. So one of the efforts that Purple wanted to do was figure out, hey, how do we prevent everyone forking and taking all these different versions of prplOS and running around with them and them not truly being prplOS, right? Not having every feature. In some cases, it's not even intentional, right? There are things that don't work or don't run. So those are the things we want to keep in mind. Next slide. Thanks. So certification is a way to solve this problem so that you know exactly what you have when you are testing it. It confirms that the middleware platforms, the things in between, are running prplOS, true prplOS, and can support all of those features that Peter was talking about, right? So you're getting into, you want to be able to run containers. You want to make sure that works on any prplOS. You want to make sure the low-level APIs, all of those microservices that he talked about, you want to make sure those work, and they all work the same when you get it. So in this case, what this allows people to verify that they've implemented all of those low-level APIs to the high-level APIs. Certification's goal is to make sure that people are doing the right thing, and for operators or users of prplOS, they can ensure that, hey, when they get prplOS for someone that's certified, they know that it has those features built in and already done. So that's what we started to build towards. Go ahead, next slide. So the real question people ask, okay, great, certification is the solution. How do we get Purple certification? So what Purple decided to do is they created a certification testing working group, and it's tasked with making sure, it's a little bit different for a working group inside of Purple. There's a couple working groups that have this, but it doesn't focus on one component. So there's a Purple Mesh working group that focuses on that. There's an LCM group that focuses on the lifecycle management containerized side. prplOS meets weekly, and they focus on the prplOS. So what the certification working group does is it aligns with all of them. So its goal is to work with all of those different groups. So it doesn't have like its own vertical, it's sort of horizontal. And its job is to work on certification for all those components. So the highlights I put in here, one thing that Purple does that is pretty cool, it's the self-testing certification. It doesn't require you to go to a lab. A lot of cert programs and past lives that I've worked with, they have lab for very good reasons. In a lot of cases, they have lab infrastructure. You have to go, you have to schedule it. People run the testing, you have to wait for the reports, all of those things. This program is very cool in that it allows self-certification. So you can get the tools, run it on your own time, in your own space, and send the results in, and not have to wait for a third-party lab. The other highlight we have is we want to list everything publicly on the Purple Foundation website. I want to do that so that anybody can find it and see it, which is great. The certifications we want to launch, in this case, are prpplWare, application, and low-level deliverables. These are the ones that we were originally chartered with. So those are the ones we work on. Note prpplWare includes the high-level API, prplOS, Purple Mesh, and LCM. So that's actually a combination of all of them, which I'll talk more in a minute about. Next slide. Yeah, so here's the charter that the board gave us. They created business requirements and said, hey, this is things we want, prpplWare and its high-level API, which I'll again talk about, low-level deliverables, which really means the API with a little bit more built into it. And that's an area we're going to be working on. We don't have a whole lot there, and I'll talk more about future certs that'll come up. And then the last one has been an interesting space. If you've been to Purple Summits, you've seen there are a lot of apps out there, surprisingly, that want to work on prplOS. And so the last area that I think, we didn't define a whole lot, the board knew when they made these requirements, I want to say 3 years ago. And they knew that apps would be there, and that would be something they would have to define. It's not really defined now. It's just, hey, we're going to do this down the line. And as I said, leveraging CD Router and other open source tools, they want to be able to enable self-testing for the certification program. So that's our goal. That's what we try to do. Next slide. All right, how do you get certified? What is the process for this, right? So we've set up these programs. How do we do it? So here's a little chart, I think, that makes it pretty easy. Step one, you execute the test. Whatever components you're trying to test, this is generic, and I'll get into more details in a moment. You run the test, you execute them, you get the results. You submit the results, and In this case, you need passing results for all of what we call core features. Another way to think of those are mandatory ones that you have to do. I'll get into more details about tests you have to do or don't do in a minute. You submit the results. So you take these results with the tools, you tar them up, you zip them up, you get them all set, and then you send them off for review. And then we do a review, approval, and listing is step 3. So in this case, there's a group of people who look at those results as a self-test. We can't just auto do it. You have to ship them in. We have to review the results. There's other paperwork involved there that I'll talk about that, goes to what do you want it listed on the website, all of those things. We have to do that, and you have to be a Purple member. Those are the types of things that happen in the review and listing process. Next slide. So what we have today, so this comes up a lot, is, hey, how do I test, right? So what things are we currently have available for testing? So what we have today is we have a high-level API test plan that has existed since November of 23. That test plan is currently focused on the high-level API. So as Peter mentioned, the high-level API is based on the BBF TR-181 data model. And what we have done for that is we have created a TR-181 profile for Purple that takes all of the parameters that we expect to exist and be on a CPE, right? So we found all the parameters that high-level API supports. It looks, for the test plan is actually in that case looks really small. I think it's 5 test cases, but it actually exercises a lot of parameters. So it goes through and sets them, gets them, makes sure they're writable, checks the permissions, it adds entire objects, and we ran all of that. The current version of it is the profile is baseline 5, which is based on the release that Peter just talked about, 3.1. So we've updated the data model to be accurate to whatever's listed in there in the profile that it requires. And so that's all in there, right? And there are optional ones we'll add in the future for that profile. So right now we call it baseline because it's everything we expect in every OS. In the future, we could define further profiles. I think PON is an easy example of that, where we would want, hey, these are the PON parameters you have to support to be able to do PON. Here's the PON profile that you would need to do. And so those are the things we'll be adding in the future. Right now, we're really just focused on the baseline part of it. The second test plan is the newer one that we're going to talk about a little bit today, and that's the prplOS test plan. That is going through last working group call. We have a meeting on Monday that will wrap that test plan up. So those microservices that Peter was showing earlier, that device.dhcp.dns. Firewall, all those microservices, we've created test cases for some of them. Well, we consider the base ones to get started, in particular, base ones that we've tested for in the 3.1 release. So right now, it contains test cases for bridging, DHCP v4, DNS, firewall, and IP interfaces. So this is more, the high-level API test plan is focused on checking those data model parameters. We're now doing the functional testing for that. So an example for DHCP is just making sure, hey, can you set the pool size? Can you set, on the LAN side, can you disable DHCP? Can you set options? Same thing for DNS or firewall. We add rules. Using USP or CWMP, you configure the device, and then it runs those individual test cases. One thing to note that's cool about the prplOS test plan is it is management agnostic. So you can run those tests either using CWMP or USP. Next slide. And like I said, that's going through working last call. The main thing we're doing right now for the prplOS test plan is figuring out the mandatory and optional test cases. So that's what's going to happen. And we should wrap that up Monday, and then we will send it on to the TSC, and it'll be a published PDF similar to the high-level test plan. So certification for 3.1, this is the thing everybody wants. This is all the questions we've been getting lately. So prplWare certification is what it's called, the marketing department here, the marketing working group decided on prplWare certification. It will be available in prplOS 3.1. You need passing results from the high-level API test plan. So you need that. You also need passing results for all the mandatory tests of prplOS. So I just talked about this. We're going through the list right now and making sure we have test cases we know work, pass. One thing we're doing is we're running into an issue where we're finding that prplOS has a bug or an issue. We file it. We have the test case. We file the test case. We file the bug. And then in the next release, when it's patched, so we'll make that test not mandatory. What we'll do is we find a bug, we notice it, we'll put it in prplOS does a great job tracking those things and getting those releases out. They'll put out a release with a fix, and then we'll make the test case from a mandatory test case. It'll go, sorry, from an optional test case. So if there's a bug, it'll be optional. When it's resolved, we'll make that test case a mandatory. We want to leave them in the test plan because we're part of CI/CD. We want to make sure those test cases are getting run, and when developers have fixes, they want to make sure that those fixes work. And so that's where the CI/CD, we want to create test content that can be used for helping prplOS improve itself. So the main things you have to do for actual certification, you need passing results for high-level API and prplOS. One aspect of this we have is we want to confirm that the testing is done on prplWare components. This is sort of new to us, and we want to make sure it's done. We've given people lots of different ways to do this, whether it's during a certification group or meeting with the review committee, showing a video, giving actual access to the component, are all options for, hey, we did this testing, it's actually on prplWare components. We wanted to make sure that all of that worked as intended. Next slide. Thank you. Okay, future certifications. So I talked about the ones we have today. So we have prplOS and high-level API. Future certifications we have, prplWare is going to continue to grow. And one thing to note about this, the prplWare certification is based on the prplOS version. So as Purple recently announced at the summit, they're planning to do 2 major releases a year. So the certification you'll get will be based on, hey, I'm certified in 3.1, I'm certified for 3.2, for example, and so on and so forth. So as new releases come out, we're going to continue to add test cases. One thing they're working on, for example, is DHCP v6 is a feature that we're currently there were some presentations in prplOS this week. They were discussing how they're making changes and doing work on that. Because of that, we'll add test cases, and then when those features are available, we'll turn those test cases on. So 3.2 will have a new prplWare test plan that will exist, and we track versions of test cases that make sense per version. So we'll say, hey, these are the test cases you have to run for 3.1. Here are the test cases you run for 3.2. And so we'll do that as well. We update it, like I said, with every release. New certifications, this is an area we're going to work on next year. The other 2 areas that we don't have cert, so prplWare, we're going to be adding more test cases for. New certifications, we've got a lot of feedback, in particular at the last summit that was in Paris, about low-level deliverables and SOCs and system platforms, wanting to make sure that they're doing the right things. So we're going to start working on that in 25. That's going to be probably our biggest initiative, is start on that. Our goal, everyone wants to know when it's going to be done. I would love for it to be done as soon as possible. Realistically, we're going to start in 25. I would love to finish in 25. I'm guessing it would be 26 before we actually have everything ready to go. But that's going to be a major effort if you're coming from a company who's working in that environment, you're worried about systems on a chip, pay attention to what the certification working group's doing. We'll announce, we have a mailing list. There's a Slack room, the how to get involved slide. I'll go through all of that. We're going to start working on that next year. And the last one, like I said, is slightly underdefined, but we know it's important, is applications. And so we'll start that as well next year. I don't think that one doesn't seem to be quite as high priority as low levels, but we know it's important. So those are the other newest future certifications that we'll be adding down the line. Go ahead to the next slide. Okay, so if you're requesting, so those are the future ones. If today you want to you're like, hey, I'm ready to do this, you have to be a valid, just a reminder, you have to be a Purple member. That's a requirement for the certification. You have to run the testing on a platform. All the core test cases must be passed. The board hasn't decided this, and I have to follow up with them. This is information I haven't gotten an answer to yet. They want to have a application fee. I do not know the value. If you want to ask me, I'm going to follow up and we'll announce that. Last time we discussed this, it was less than 5,000 was their plan, likely between 1,000 and 3,000. I haven't heard any differently, but I will follow up about that. Next slide. Important links. So here's a link to all of the documents. I know you guys can't click on them as part of the webinar, but they're here. They'll be included. I think the slides will be available. So there's a program certification guide. This is a document that exists on the Purple site. If you go look for it, if you just go under documents on the side, there's the certification test. This really documents what the certified requester has to do, what test tools have to do, and the review process. High-level API test plan is available. That's on there. That's a PDF as well. The prplOS test plan isn't available to non-members at the moment. It's not listed on the site. It's because it hasn't finished yet. Like I said, we're going to wrap that up next week. And then that will be available there as well. And then the last one is a Confluence link to the data model, the profile that we have created, the TR-181. And next slide. Yeah, how do I get involved? Peter, do you want to take this one? You're better suited
Yeah,
for this section.
absolutely. In the meantime, Tim, we got, that's why I jumped
Yeah,
back. We got a few questions
yeah,
in the Q&A, so maybe we can just go through it because it's certification related. So one question here is how to build the environment if we'd like to do self-certification.
yeah. So the environment is you need to have a platform that you want to test, and you need a CD router, and you plug them both in. In our case, it's actually just WAN and LAN. So CD router, actually, we need one WAN port and two LAN ports. You can connect them to the device, and then you run the. We have an expansion called prpl certification. So that's the expansion you want to have. And if you have that expansion, you can run those test cases. Like I said, the good part is this is self-certification, so you can run them as much as you want. There's dirty laundry. You can blow them up. You can run it. You can run them all at once. You can run them one at a time to figure out how you get a test run. And then when you have a full test run that has passing for all the mandatory tests, you can submit it. Yeah. The next question I see is the prplOS test plan. So the link is there. I can put it, I will try to put it in the Q&A answer if I can get down there. So I see people actually want to list the link to the test plan. I will drop that
Yeah.
in the answers. So.
Yeah. So the other question I will take quickly. It's a question, any quick way to upgrade from previous versions to 3.1? Yeah, basically at the moment, let's say it that way, the web upgrade is technically done. The issue here is that to do the preferred way of doing a firmware upgrade on prplOS, this requires some preparational work from the platform providers, in this case for the Freedom and the OSP platform, so how the flash layout is done and security mechanisms, etc. So at the moment, it's still done via the bootloader. Nevertheless, the process is well documented, so it's I think a low-hanging fruit. And here we get another question. I think,
Yeah, I see
Tim,
it.
this is something you should
Yep.
take.
Yeah. So the question was, would you like to know more about how the prpplWare component verification is done in practice? Does it mean it has a debug console available on the device? No, we don't intend for it to have a debug console. We just need to be able to ensure that it's prpplOS. So the main goal there is we just want to be able to show ways that it's prpplOS and not running on some other platform. Is the main requirement that we have. So we don't need a debug console if you can display other ways to show that it's a full prpplOS stack and you haven't done it's running all the components as debug console is obviously one way to do it. There are other ways we can do that as well. So if you have questions about that, please reach out to me. That it's definitely vague, and it's intentionally vague because we didn't want to force people to have different components or have some standardized way. We totally understand that people are going to restrict certain access, and so we'll work with you on that.
But Tim, I have to admit, I like the idea of the debug console because no,
I assume most
it's
people will do it. I assume that's how
right.
a lot of people will do it. It's the easiest way for sure.
Yeah,
I agree.
because
I think it's nice.
yeah, because here you can clearly see the prplOS version. You can do a quick test on Uber CLI to see, okay, tools are running, the data model is there, and you could even do like a debug run while some tests are performed. So cool. Yeah, I like that. Okay. yeah, this is, I think that then the next question is a little bit more about LCM. So I think it's slightly out of scope.
Yeah, it's slightly
For
out of hope. I think the question, so for everyone else, from the application developer perspective, can I assume portability of app from one prplOS to another? The certification program, I'll talk about it from that perspective. Down the line, that's one of the goals we want to have is figuring out how we certify applications to make sure that they can run on a version of prplOS. For cross prplOS, I think that's something we're going to have to tackle down the line. If that's the question about that, is that I think there's a lot to be discovered there. Obviously, we want to make this as robust as possible, and it would be great if we knew the applications ran on which versions of prplOS. So I think that's something, down the line as the certification program matures, we'll be working on.
yeah, I mean, it's for me, it's not clear because the the requester asks about prplOS flavor. I suppose that means versions. So in my understanding, if you are upstepping prplOS, your application in the container is still working. If it's a newer version that may require some specific feature, so for instance, if your container needs to run as unprivileged, and that is currently not available in Purple LCM, which is in prplWare 3.1, then of course, if you want to run it on a slightly older version, that might be complicated. Okay, then here we get the question how to get the slides. I think you shortly addressed that, Tim, already, right?
Yeah, I'll when we post this, I think we'll probably post both the slides and the webinar link to make that easier.
Right.
But if you're looking for the test plan links in general, if you go on Purple Confluence, there's a space for the certification working group, and each test plan has its own page. So you can go there
Yeah.
as well. But yeah, we'll try to make these links available.
Okay, great. So no further questions so far. Then, yeah, maybe a few. Okay. Okay, here's a clarification. So the requester says, I meant from the high-level API and low-level API access semantics. By flavors, I mean various CPE vendors. Yeah, I mean, this is the idea of containers that they run independently. Yeah, so you can run the containers on different CPEs without major modifications. Nevertheless, I'm not an expert in LCM. So this is definitely a question you could further discuss in detail in Slack, for instance, with members of the LCM working group. Okay, so then how to get involved with Purple? I think this is a question for those who are new. So as you know, to do certifications, you have to be a member of the Purple Foundation. There are several membership levels. I put the link in here. It's on the official website, so I don't think it's necessary to post it even in chats. Becoming active in one of the several working groups is always highly appreciated. It's a community in total, and we live from the contributions of our members and the collaboration. If you join working group meetings, they can become very intense sometimes. So we always fight for good solutions that are working. And of course, there are compromises as always, but it's a really active community, and we try to move things into a good direction for everyone. Of course, you can also contribute to prplWare and prplOS. So there are several things you can do. One, for instance, if you have a software component that you think is interesting for the community, can make a proposal which then is going to be reviewed by the PSC to see, okay, is there interest? Is this meeting the requirements we may have, etc. You can provide CI and QA resources, always highly welcome. Since the test bed is growing, we're getting more and more devices in. This is a really, really welcome contribution for sure. You can also bring in new reference platforms. If you say, okay, this is an interesting device for operators for the carrier market, please. It's a lot of work to make sure everything works properly, to support the CI efforts, to support the testing, to have resources for bug fixing, etc. So this is also highly appreciated. And another thing, we just had one in Paris, attend the Purple Summit. Yeah, it was a really, really cool summit. I think everybody was very happy about it. Very lively atmosphere. I don't know, Tim, what was your impression, but it was really nice.
I think it was great. It was packed. There was a lot of great questions. I really enjoyed it. Actually, it's great to see everybody there. I love going every year. Doesn't hurt that it's in Paris too.
Indeed, indeed. But I have to emphasize, we've been for the Purple Summit in Paris, so it was about the summit, not about Paris.
Yes.
And I can also add that we already have the date for the next Purple Summit, which is Monday, October 13th of next year, and we'll have our technical day, which again will be members only for the business. The 13th is open to everybody with a ticket. The 14th, the Tuesday, will be a technical day once again that will be open to members only. So we'll be delighted to see you all there. Save the date in your calendars.
Yeah. And, as I mentioned earlier, right, a lot of good conversations and kind of give us directions as working group chairs, right? People come in and ask really good questions. So it's also a place where I don't want to say we make decisions, but we definitely get inspiration during those summits from groups of people.
Yeah, absolutely. I can just agree to that. And specifically on the technical day, this is very, very interesting because besides all the presentations, you have the opportunity to talk to the working group chairs, to the members, to have technical discussions as well, ask questions, and so on. So it's a great opportunity. Here's a question: what's the venue for the next Purple Summit? It's the same venue like this year. I think it's a Palais de Congrès again, Shelley, if I'm not mistaken.
Exactly that.
And in Paris.
Yeah, it'll be the same venue, and for the technical day, that will also be in Orange, like last year, or like this year, rather.
Yeah, and last year.
Great.
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Then, thank you, everybody.
Yeah. Thank you, everyone.
I don't see any further questions.
Thanks so much, everyone, for joining.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everybody. And if you have any questions and you're a member already, then please feel free to use the Slack channels or attend the working group sessions for anything you would like to know. Thank you so much.
Thanks. And thank you, Tim. Thank you, Peter.
Pleasure.